wanted the gold, and I sought it. I scrabbled and mucked like a slave. Was it famine or scurvy? I fought it. I hurled my youth into the grave. I wanted the gold. I got it. Came up with a fortune last fall. Yet, somehow, life's not what I thought it. And somehow, the gold isn't all. No. There's the land. Have you seen it? It's the cussedest land that I know. From the big, dizzy mountains that screen it to the deep, death-like valleys below. Some say God was tired when he made it. Some say it's a fine land to shun. Maybe. But there's some who have traded for no land on earth. And I'm one. You come to get rich. Damn good reason. You feel like an exile at first. Oh, you'll hate it like hell for a season. And then you are worse than the worst. It grips you like some sort of sinning. It twists you from foe to friend. It seems it's been since the beginning. It seems it shall be to the end. I've stood in some mighty mouthed hollow that's plumb full of hush to the brim. I've watched the big husky sun wallow in crimson and gold and grow dim, till the moon set the pearly peaks gleaming and the stars tumbled out neck and crop. And I thought that I surely was dreaming with the peace of the world piled on top. The summer, no sweeter was ever. The sunshiny woods all a-thrill, the grayling a-leap in the river, the bighorn asleep in the hill, the strong life that never knows harness, the woods where the caribou call, the freshness, the freedom, the farness. Oh God, now I'm stuck on it all. The winter, the brightness that blinds you, the wide land locked tight as a drum, the cold fear that follows and finds you, the silence that bludgeons you dumb, the snows that are older than history, the woods where the weird shadows slant, the stillness, the moonlight, the mystery. I bade them goodbye. I can't. There's a land where the mountains are nameless, and the rivers all run God knows where. There are lives that are erring, aimless, and deaths just hang by a hair. There are hardships that nobody reckons. There are valleys unpeopled and still. There's a land. Oh, it beckons and beckons. And I want to go back. And I will. They're making my money diminish. But I'm sick of the taste of champagne. Thank God. When I'm skinned to a finish, I'll pike to the Yukon again. I'll fight. And you bet it's no sham fight, it's hell. But I've been there before. And it's better than this by a damn sight. So me for the Yukon once more. There's gold. And it's haunting and haunting. It's luring me on as of old. Yet it isn't the gold that I'm wanting so much as the finding the gold. It's that great big broad land way up yonder. It's the forests where silence has lease. It's the beauty that thrills me with wonder, and the stillness that fills me with peace. Good evening. Thank you for coming out tonight to share these memories with me. My name is Robert Service. In my day, I was called the Canadian Kipling, the Bard of the Yukon, my favorite, the people's poet. It's been said that time is the longest distance between two places. That is true. But memory spans the vastness of time and space with the speed of thought. I was born in England in 1874 and shuffled off this mortal coil in September of 1859. To sleep, perchance to dream. Well, I never dream, but I do remember. I like to delve into what was the book of my life, and I pull out whatever memory I can find. And whatever I discover there, I'm always swept away by the breath of memory. Oh dear. One never knows what one's going to find or what order they're going to come out. Pat Casey had a billy goat. He gave the name of Seamus because it was, the neighbors said, a national disgrace. And sure enough, that animal was eminently famous for masticating every rag of laundry round the place. From skirts to shirts, prodigiously he proved his powers of chewing. The question of digestion seemed to matter not at all. But you will agree, I think, with me, his limits of misdoing was reached the day he swallowed Mrs. Rooney's old red shawl. Now, Mrs. Annie Rooney was a winsome widow woman, and many a bouncing boy had sought to make her change her name. And living just across the way, it was surely only human. A lonesome man like Casey would be wishfully the same. So, every Sunday, shaved and shined, he'd take the fine occasion to call upon the lady, and she'd take his hat and coat. And supping tea, it seemed that she might yield to his persuasion. But alas, he hadn't counted on that devastating goat. For Seamus loved his master with a deep and dumb devotion. And everywhere that Casey went, the goat would want to go. And though I cannot analyze a quadruped's emotion, they say the beast was jealous. And I reckon it was so. For every time that Casey went to call on Mrs. Mooney, beside the gate the goat would wait with woefulness intense, until one day it chanced they were fast becoming spoony, when Seamus spied that old red shawl aflutter on the fence. Now Mrs. Mooney loved that shawl beyond all rhyme or reason. Maybe 'twas an heirloom or a cherished souvenir. For judging by the way she wore it season after season, you'd think it was as precious as a product of cashmere. So Seamus strolls toward it, and no doubt the colour pleased him, for he biffed it and sniffed it as most any goat might do. Then his melancholy left him, as a sense of hunger seized him, and he wagged his tail with rapture as he started in to chew. "Begorra, you're a daisy," said the doting Mr. Casey to the blushing widow woman as they parted at the door. "With your tenderness and teasing, sure, you've set me heart a-blazing, and I dread the day I'll never see me Annie any more." "Ah, go on now with your blarney," said the widow, softly sighing. And she went to pull his whiskers when dismay her bosom smote. The old red shawl, 'twas missing where she'd left it bravely drying. Then she saw it disappearing down the neck of Casey's goat. Fiercely flamed her Irish temper. "Look," says she, "the thieving devil! Sure he's made me shawl his supper. Well, I hope it's to his taste. And excuse me, Mr. Casey, if I seem to be uncivil, for I'll never wed a man with such a misbegotten beast." She slammed the door and left him in a state of consternation, and he couldn't understand it till he spied that grinning goat. Then, with eloquence, he cussed it, and his final fulmination was a poem of profanity impossible to quote. So, blasting goats and petticoats, and feeling downright sinful, despairfully he wandered into Shinnigan's shebeen, and straightway he proceeded to absorb a mighty skinful of the deadliest variety of Finnegan's poteen.
Wow.
And when he started homeward, it was early in the morning, and Seamus followed faithfully a yard behind his back. And sudden, Casey stumbled, and without the slightest warning, like a lump of lead, he tumbled right across the railway track. And there he lay, serenely, and defied the powers to budge him, reposing like a baby with his head upon the rail. But Seamus seemed unhappy, and from time to time would nudge him, though his prods of protestation were without the least avail. Then, to that goatish mind, perhaps a sense of fell disaster came stealing like a spectre in the dim and dreary dawn. For his bleats of warning blended with the snorings of his master in a chorus of calamity. But Casey slumbered on. But oh, the goat was troubled, for his efforts were redoubled. Now he nibbled at his whisker, now he nibbled at his ear, now he shook him by the shoulder, and with fear becoming bolder, Seamus bellowed like a foghorn. But the sleeper would not hear. Then up and down the railway line he scampers for assistance, and anxiously he hurries back and sought with tug and strain to pull his master from the track. When sudden, in the distance, he heard the roar and rumble of a fast approaching train. Did Seamus faint and falter? No. He stood there stark and splendid. True, his tummy was distended, but he gave his horns a toss. By them, his goathood's honor would be gallantly defended. And if their valor failed him, he would perish with his boss. So dauntlessly, he lowered his head, and ever clearer, he heard the throb and thunder of the Continental Mail. He would face that mighty monster. It was coming nearer. He would fight it. He would smite it. And he'd never show his tail. Can you see that hirsute hero standing there in tragic glory? Can you hear the Pullman porters shrieking horror to the skies? No, you can't, because my story has no end so grim and gory. Seamus did not perish, his master did not die. Why, at this very present moment, Casey swaggers hale and hearty, and Seamus strolls beside him with a bright bell at his throat, while the recent Mrs. Mooney, she's the gayest of the party, for now she's Mrs. Casey, and she's crazy for the goat. You're wondering what happened? Well, you know, the truth is stranger than the wildest brand of fiction. So I'll tell you without shame. There was Seamus and his master in the face of grave disaster, and a giant locomotive coming down in smoke and flame. What power on earth could save them? Yet, golden inspiration to gods and goats alike may come. So, in that brutish brain, a thought was born. The old red shawl, then, rearing with elation, like lightning, Seamus threw it up and flagged and stopped the train. To Seamus. All the world's a stage, and each man in his time has many parts. I took a contract to bury the body of blasphemous Bill Mackay. Whenever, wherever, and whatsoever the manner of death he died. Whether he die in the light of day, or under the peak-faced moon, in cabin, dance hall, camp or dive, mucklucks or patent shoe, on velvet tundra, virgin peak, by glacier, drift, or draw, by muskeg hollow or canyon gloom, by avalanche, fang, or claw, by battle, murder, sudden wealth, pestilence, hooch, or lead. I swore by the book I'd follow and look till I found my tombless dead. For Bill was a dainty kind of cuss, and his mind was mighty sought on a dinky patch with flowers and grass in a civilized boneyard lot. And where he died and how he died didn't matter a damn, so long as he had a grave with thrills and a tombstone epigram. So I promised him, and he paid the price in good Chicago coin, the very same I blowed that night down in the Tenderloin. Then I painted a 3-foot slab of pine. Here lies poor Bill Mackay. I hung it up on my cabin wall, and I waited for Bill to die. Years passed away, and at last one day came a squaw with a story strange of a long deserted line of traps way back of the Bighorn Range, of a little hut by the Great Divide, and a white man, stiff and still, lying there by his lonesome self. And I figured, that must be Bill. So I thought of the contract I'd made with him, and I took down from the shelf the swell black box with the silver plate he'd picked out for himself. And I stuffed it full of grub and hooch and slung it on the sleigh, harnessed up my team of dogs, and was gone at the break of day. You know what it's like in the Yukon wild when it's 69 below and the ice worms wriggle their purple heads from the crust of the pale blue snow, and the pine trees crack like little guns in the silence of the woods, and icicles hang down like tusks from under the parka's hood. When the stovepipe smoke breaks sudden off, the sky is weirdly lit. The careless feel of a bit of steel burns like a red-hot spit. When the mercury is a frozen ball and the frost fiend stalks to kill, well, it was just like that day when I went out to look for Bill. Oh, the awful hush. It seemed to crush me down on every hand as I blundered blind, a trail to find through this blank, bitter land, half dazed, half crazed in the winter wild, with its grim, heart-breaking woes, and the ruthless strife for a grip on life that only the sourdough knows. North by compass, north I pressed, river, peak, and plain, passed like a dream. I slept to lose, and waked to dream again. River, plain, mighty peak, who could stand unawed? As their summits blazed, who could stand unfazed at the foot of the throne of God? North, north, through a land accursed, shunned by the scouring brutes, and all I heard was my own harsh word and the whine of the Malamutes. Till at last I came to a cabin squat, built on the side of a hill. I burst in the door, and there, on the floor, frozen to death, lay Bill. Ice, white ice in a winding sheet, wreathing each smoke-grimed wall. Ice on the stovepipe, ice on the bed, ice gleaming over all. Sparkling ice in the dead man's chest, glittering ice in his hair, ice in his fingers, ice in his heart, ice in his glassy stare. Hard as a log and trussed like a frog with his arms and legs outspread. I looked at the coffin I brought for him, and I looked at that gruesome dead. At last I spoke. Bill likes his joke, but still, God darn his eyes. A man had ought to consider his mates in the way he goes and dies. Have you ever stood in an Arctic hut, in the shadow of the pole, with a little coffin 6 by 3, and a grief you can't control? Have you ever sat with a frozen corpse that looks at you with a grin that seems to say, you may try all day, you'll never jam me in? I'm not a man of the quitting kind, but I never felt so blue as I sat there, gazing at that stiff, wondering what I'd do. Then I rose, kicked off the husky dogs that were nosing around about, and a little roaring fire on the stove, and I started to thaw Bill out. Well, I thawed and thawed for 13 days, still didn't seem no good. His arms and legs stuck out like pegs. 'Twas as if he was made of wood. At last I said it ain't no use, he's froze too hard to thaw. He's obstinate, he won't lie straight, so I guess I have to saw. So I sawed off poor Bill's arms and legs. I laid them snug and straight in the swell black box he picked out for himself with the dinky silver plate. I came nigh near to shedding a tear as I nailed him safely down. I stowed him away in my Yukon sleigh, and I started back to town. So I buried him, as the contract was, in a narrow grave and deep. And there he's waiting the great clean-up when the judgment sluice heads sweep. And I, well, I smoke my pipe and I meditate in the land of the midnight sun. And sometimes I wonder if they was those awful things I've done. And as I sit in the parson talks, expounding of the law, I often think of poor old Bill and how hard he was to saw. The man above is a murderer. The man below is a thief. And I lay in the bunk between, wasted with pain and grief. A weary bag of skin and bones, ailing beyond belief. My feet were froze. My lifeless toes were purple, green, and gray. The little flesh that clung to my bones, you could punch it in holes like clay. The skin on my gums was a sullen black, slowly peeling away. I surely was in a direful fix, and often I wondered why. They didn't take the chance that was left, leave me alone to die. Finish me off with a dose of dope. So utterly lost was I. But no, they brewed me the green spruce tea. They nursed me there like a child. The homicide was good to me. They bathed my sores and smiled. And the thief, he starved, that I might be fed. His eyes were kind and mild. But they were woefully wicked men. And often at night, in pain, I heard the murderer dream of his deed, dream it over again. I heard the poor thief sorrowing for the dead self he had slain. Never will I forget that dawn, so evil, askew and gray, when they wrapped me round in skins of beasts and bore me to a sleigh. We started out. The nearest post was 100 miles away. Never will I forget the train they blew, with its its tense, unuttered woes. And the crunch, 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 as their snowshoes sank through the crust of the hollow snow. My breath would fail, every beat of my heart like a blow. Oftentimes, I'd die the death. I'd wake to life anew. The sun would be all ablaze on the waste, and the sky a bright and blue. And the tears would rise in my snow-blind eyes, furrow my cheeks like dew. The camps we made, and their strength was outplayed. The day was pinched and wan. Oh, the joy of that blessed halt. How I did dread the dawn, and how I hated those weary men that rose, dragged me on. Oh, how I longed to rest, to rest. The snow was so sweet a shroud. And oh, how I cried when they urged me on. Cried, cursed them aloud. Yet on they strayed, all racked, pain. Sorely their backs were bowed. And then it was all like a lurid dream. I prayed for a swift release from the ruthless ones who would not leave me alone to die in peace, till I wakened up and I found myself at the post of the mounted police. And there was my friend, the murderer. And there was my friend, the thief. Bracelets of steel round their wrists. Wicked beyond belief. But when they come to God's judgment seat, may I be allowed to brief. When to the sessions of sweet, silent thought, I summon up remembrance of things past. There you are. And if the while I'll think on thee, dear friend, all losses are restored, sorrows end. Well, hello, Sam. There are strange things done in midnight sun by the men who moil for gold. The Arctic trails have their secret tales that would make your blood run cold. The Northern Lights have seen queer sights, but the queerest they ever did see was that night on the marge of the Lake Labarge, cremated Sam McGee. Well, Sam McGee was from Tennessee, where the cotton blooms and blows. Why he left his home in the South to roam round the pole, God only knows. He was always cold, but the land of gold seemed to hold him like a spell, though he'd often say in his homely way, he'd sooner live in hell. On a Christmas day, we were mushing our way over the Dawson Trail. Talk of your cold. Through the parka's fold, it stabbed like a driven nail. If our lids would close and the lashes froze, sometimes we couldn't see. It wasn't much fun, but the only one to whimper was Sam McGee. And that very night, as we lay packed tight in our robes beneath the snow, the dogs were fed, and the stars overhead were dancing heel and toe. Sam turns to me, "Cap," says he, "I'll cash in this trip, I guess. And if I do, I'm asking that you don't refuse this last request." Well, he seemed so low that I couldn't say no. And he said, with a sort of a moan, "It's the cursed cold, and it's got right hold. I'm chilled clean through to the bone. Yet it tain't being dead. It's the awful dread of the icy grave that pains. So I want you to swear that, foul or fair, you'll cremate my last remains." Well, a pal's last need is a thing to heed, so I swore I would not fail. As we started on at the streak of dawn, but oh, he looked ghastly pale. He crouched on the sleigh and he raved all day of his home in Tennessee. And before nightfall, a corpse was all that was left of Sam McGee. There wasn't a breath in that land of death as I hurried, horror-driven, with this corpse half hid that I couldn't get rid because of a promise given. It was lashed to the sleigh and it seemed to say, "You may tax your brawn and brains, but you promise true, it's up to you to cremate these last remains." Well, a promise made is a debt unpaid, and the trail has its own stern code. As the days wore on, though my lips were dumb, in my heart, how I cursed that load. In the long, long nights by the lone firelight, while the huskies round in a ring howled out their woes to the homeless snows. Oh God, how I loathed the thing. And day after day that quiet clay seemed to heavy and heavier grow. And on I went, though the dogs were spent and the grub was getting low. The trail was bad, and I felt half mad that I swore I would not give in. I'd often sing to that hateful thing, and it hearkened with a grin. Till I came to the marge of Lake the Barge, and a derelict there lay. It was jammed in the ice, but I saw in a trice it was called the Alice May. I looked at it, and I thought of it. I looked at my frozen chum. "Here," says I, with a sudden cry, "is my crematorium." Some planks I tore from the cabin floor and I lit the boiler fire. Some coal I found that was lying around and heaped the fuel higher. The furnace roared and the flames just soared. Such a blaze you seldom see. I burrowed a hole in the glowing coal and I stuffed in Sam McGee. Then I made a hike, for I didn't like to hear him sizzle so. And the heavens scowled and the huskies growled and the wind began to blow. It was icy cold, but the hot sweat rolled down my cheeks. I don't know why. The jet black smoke in an inky cloak went streaking down the sky. I do not know how long in the snow I wrestled with grisly fear. But the stars came out, danced about ere again I ventured near. I was sick with dread. I bravely said, "I'll just take a peek inside. I guess he's cooked." And it's time I looked. And the door I opened wide, and there sat Sam, looking cool and calm in the heart of the furnace roar. And he wore a smile you could see a mile. And he said, "Please, close that door. I'm fine in here, but I greatly fear you will let in the cold and storm. Since I left Plum Tree down in Tennessee, it's the first time I've been warm." Here's to you, sir. It's not mine. D.S. David Smale. He dreamed away his hours of school. He sat with such an absent air, the master reckoned him a fool and gave him up in dull despair. Well, While other boys were making hay, you'd find him loafing by the stream. He'd take a book, slip away, and just pretend to fish and dream. His brothers passed him in the race. They climbed the hill, clutched the prize. He did not seem to heed. His face was tranquil as the summer skies. He lived apart. He spoke with few. Abstractedly through life he went. Oh, what he dreamed of, no one knew. Yet he seemed to be content. I see him now, so old and gray, his eyes with inward vision dim. And though he stumbled on his way somehow, I almost envied him. And at last, beside his bed I stood. Is life done so soon? He sighed. It's been so rich, so full, so good. I've loved it all. And so he died. We were a lot alike, David and I. But I wasn't content to let dreams be my master. The old sheep herder of my uncle's farm never left it. But I needed to go out into the world to find what I could find. I found plenty. A bunch of the boys were whooping it up in the Malamute Saloon.
Yep.
The kid that handles the music box was hitting a ragtime tune. Back of the bar, in a solo game, sat Dangerous Dan McGrew. And watching his luck was his light of love, the lady that's known as Lou. When out of the night, which was 50 below, and into the din and the glare, there stumbles a miner, fresh from the cricks, dog dirty, and loaded for bear. He looked like a man with a foot in the grave, hardly the strength of a louse. Yet he tilted a poke of dust in the bar and called for drinks for the house. There's none could place the stranger's face, though we searched ourselves for a clue. We drank his health. The last to drink was Dangerous Dan McGrew. There's men that somehow just grip your eyes and hold them hard like a spell. And such was he. And he seemed to me like a man who lived in hell, with a face most hair and the dreary stare of a dog whose day is done, as he watered the green stuff in his glass. And the drops fell one by one. Then I got to figuring who he was, wondering what he'd do. And I turned my head, and there watching him was a lady that's known as Lou. His eyes went rubbering around the room, and he seemed in a kind of a daze, till at last that old piano fell in the waves' wandering gaze. The ragtime kid was having a drink. There's no one else in the stool, so the stranger stumbles across the room, flopped down there like a fool. In a buckskin shirt that was glazed with dirt, he sat. I saw him sway, and he clutched the keys in his taloned hands. My God, that man could play. Were you ever out in the great alone, when the moon was awful clear, and the icy mountains hemmed you in with a silence you most could hear, with only the howl of a timber wolf as you camped there in the cold, a half-dead thing in a stark, dead world, clean mad for the muck called gold, while high overhead, green, yellow, and red, the north lights swept in bars? Then you've a hunch what the music meant. Hunger and night and the stars. And hunger not of the belly kind that's banished with bacon and beans, but the gnawing hunger of lonely men for home and all that it means. for a fireside far from the cares that are, 4 walls and a roof above, but, oh, so cram full of cozy joy, and crowned with a woman's love, a woman dearer than all the world, and true as heaven is true. God, how ghastly she looks through her rouge, the lady that's known as Lou. Then, on a sudden, the music changed, so soft you scarce could hear, but you felt that your life had been looted clean of all that it once held dear, that someone had stolen the woman you loved, that her love was a devil's lie, that your guts were gone, and the best for you was to crawl away and die. 'Twas the crowning cry of a heart's despair, and it thrilled you through and through. I guess I'll make it a spread, Monsieur, said dangerous Dan McGrew. The music almost died away, then burst like a pent-up flood, and it seemed to say, repay, repay, and my eyes were blind with blood. The thought came back of an ancient wrong, and it stung like a frozen lash, and the lust awoke to kill, to kill. Then the music stopped with a crash, and the stranger turned, and his eyes, they burned in a most peculiar way. In a buckskin shirt that was glazed with dirt he sat, and I saw him sway. And his lips went in a kind of grin, and he spoke, and his voice was calm. Boys, says he, you don't know me. None of you give a damn. But I want a state, and my words are straight, and I'll bet my poke they're true. And one of you is a hound of hell, and that one is Dan McGrew. Then I ducked my head, and the lights went out, and 2 guns blazed in the dark, and a woman screamed. The lights came up. 2 men lay stiff and stark. Pitched on his head, pumped full of lead, lay dangerous Dan McGrew. The man from the cricks lay clutched to the breast of the lady that's known as Lou. Well, them's the actual facts of the case, and I guess I ought to know. They say the stranger was crazed with hooch. I'm not denying it, so. I'm not as wise as the lawyer guys, but strictly between us 2. The lady that kissed him and pinched his poke was the lady that's known as Lou. Lulu Johnson was her name. She was the first person I met when I went to Dawson. The arrival of a newcomer was a big deal. And I arrived at 8:30 and I was exhausted. I went straight to bed. And 20 minutes later, my landlord knocked, and Spanish Jeanette, dog-faced Kitty, and Lulu Johnson were waiting for me downstairs. God bless you, ladies. I lost my brother Albert. Becoming rich and famous poet is a time-consuming process, and I always thought I'd have time to see my family again. We lost Albert in the fields of France in April of 1916. But I've thought of him often since. I thought if we could have one more afternoon together, one more cup of tea together, what would we talk about? What would be on his mind? What would he say? As I was saying, no thank you, I never take cream with my tea. Cows weren't allowed in the trenches. Got out of the habit, you see. As I was saying, our colonel leaps up like a youngster of 10. Come on, lads, he shouts, and we'll show them. And he sprang to the head of his men. Then some bally thing seemed to trip him, for he fell on his face with a slam. Oh, he died like a true British soldier. The last word he uttered was, "Damn." Hang it. I loved that old fellow. Something just burst in my brain. I cared no more for the bullets than I would for a shower of rain. It was an awfully funny sensation. I say, this is jolly nice tea. I felt as if something had broken. By gad, I was suddenly free. Free for a glorious moment, beyond regulations and laws. Free just to wallow and slaughter as the chap of the Stone Age was. So on I went, joyously nursing a berserker rage of my own. Though all my chaps were behind me, feeling most frightfully alone. With the bullets and bombs dong-dinging and the crock, the swish of the shrap, I found myself humming Ben Bolt. Would you pass me the sugar, old chap? 2 lumps, please. Where was I? Oh, yes, the jolly old dash. Well, simply ripped through the barrage and on with a roar and a crash. My fellows, old Nick couldn't stop them. On they went with a yell, till we tripped on the Boches' sandbags. Nothing much left to tell. A trench so tattered, battered, even a rat couldn't live. Some corpses, tangled, mangled, wire you could pass through a sieve. And the jolly old guns had bilked us, cheated us out of the show. My chaps were just raring for a red mix-up with the foe. So I shouted them to follow. On we went, roaring again, battle-tuned and exultant, on in the leaden rain. And all at once, a machine gun barks from a bit of a bank, and our major roars in a fury, "We've got to take it on flank!" And he was running like fire to lead us. Down like a stone he comes. It's full of typewriter bullets. His pudding is full of plums. So I took his job. We got him. By gad, sir. We got him like rats. Down in a deep shell crater, we fought like Kilkenny cats. It was pleasant, just for a moment, to be sheltered, out of range, with someone you saw to go for. Made it an agreeable change. The Boches have missed my bullets. My chaps gave a bayonet jolt. All the time I remember, I whistled and hummed Ben Bolt. Well, that little job was over. For hell for leather we ran, on to the second trench line. That's where the fun began. For though we'd strafed him like fury, there were still plenty Boches about. My fellows' teeth set, eyes glaring, like terriers routed them out. And I stumbled on one of their dugouts and shouted, "Is anyone there?" And a voice, "Yes, one, but I'm wounded," came faint up the narrow stair. My man was descending before me. Sudden, a cry, a shot. I say, this cake's delicious. You make it yourself, do you know? My man, oh, they killed the poor devil. Why, if there was one, there was 10. So, after we'd bombed them sufficient, I went down at the head of the men. 4 tried to sneak from a bunk hole, but we cornered those rotters all right. I'd rather not go into details. It was messy, in that bit of the fight. Oh, all of it's ghastly messy. Let's talk of pleasanter things. The skirts the girls are wearing these days. Ridiculous fluffy things. So short, they must show. Oh, hang it. If I must, I must. Well, we cleaned out the second trench line, bomb and bayonet thrust. On we went to the third one. Quite calloused to crumping by now. Some of the chaps had passed us, making a deuce of a row. My chaps, I just couldn't hold 'em. Strange how it is with gore. In some ways, it's just like whiskey. You taste it, you must have more. Their eyes were like beacons of battle. By gad, sir, they wouldn't be calmed. So I headed them straight for the bomb belt, racing like Billy be damned. Oh, it didn't take long to arrive there. Those who arrived at all. The machine guns were certainly chronic. The shindy, enough to appall. Oh, yes, I've omitted to tell you, I had wounds on the chest and my head. My shirt was torn to a gun rag. My face blood gummy and red. I'm thinking I looked like a madman. Fancy I felt like one too. Half naked, slinging a rifle. God, what a glorious do. As I sit here in old Piccadilly, sipping my afternoon tea, I see a blind, bullet-chipped devil. It's hard to believe that it's me. I see a wild, war-damaged demon smashing out left and right, and humming Ben Bolt rather loudly. I'm hugely enjoying the fight. And as for my men, oh, may God bless them. I've loved them ever since then. They fought like shining angels. They're the pick of the land. My men. And the trench was a reeking shambles, not a bush to be seen alive. So I thought. But on rounding a traverse, I came on a covey of 5. 4 of them threw up their flippers with the 5th chap, Sergeant. He was game. And though I had a bomb and revolver, he came at me just the same. Sporty thing, that. I tell you, I couldn't just blow him to hell. So I swung to the point of his jawbone and down like a ninepence he fell. And when I brought him to reason, he wasn't half bad, that Hun. He bandaged my head and short rib as well as a doc could have done. So back I went for my bushes, as gay as a 2-year-old colt. And it suddenly struck me as rummy. I still was humming Ben Bolt. Ach, by Jove, I've bored you. Ach, you just let me babble away. Let's talk of things that matter. Your new car, or the latest play. Our revels now are ended. These, our actors, as I foretold you, are spirits and are melted into air, into thin air. And like the baseless fabric of this vision, cloud-capped towers, solemn temples, gorgeous palaces, dismembered corpses. Yea, all which inherit shall dissolve. And like this insubstantial pageant faded, leave not a rack behind. We are such stuff as dreams are made of, and our little lives are rounded with a sleep.